Welcome to Life-Changing Challengers, the podcast where passion meets purpose. I'm Brad Minus, your host, guiding you through stories of transformation and triumph, from endurance feats to overcoming adversity. Our guests defy the limits and inspire action. Ready to ignite your desire and incinerate your barriers? Join us. Your journey to the extraordinary begins now. And welcome back to another episode of Life-Changing Challengers. Again, I'm your host, Brad Minus, and I am so extremely lucky to have with me Amita Sharma. She is a women's holistic wellness champion with a platform called NourishDoc. She has several programs for women geared towards women on anti-aging, detox, emotional wellness, and menopause, which is her specialty, sexual health and weight loss. And we'll get into that a little bit later. But let's first ask Amita, how you doing?
I'm doing great.
So, Amita, can you tell us a little bit about your childhood, where you grew up, was the complement of your family, and what was it like to be Amita as a kid?
Yeah, so I grew up in a very tiny little town, which probably nobody has ever heard of in India. It's called Talwada. And actually, I was born in a town bordering Pakistan, believe it or not, Amritsar. This town is so tiny, even now, if I tell anyone, nobody even knows in India as well, because it had a dam and it was just a small community of engineers who were trying to take care of the dam. And that's where I grew up as a kid. And I was sent to boarding school for almost 10 years at age 13. Yes, it's very different at that time. And you don't send your kids, especially in a country like India. I was in boarding school until I almost graduated from architecture college. So you can imagine the back and forth. And during the holidays, I would go to my grandmom, which I told you, a town near the border of Pakistan and India, which is almost a very kind of a feisty town, I should say that, because of the tensions that happened, right, in 1947 because of the partition. So that's an interesting way that I grew up in all this kind of like a feisty town and a small town and the boarding school. And then in between going to all my different relatives, for when the time off. That was my a little bit of what I experienced before I landed here in United States.
So you went to a boarding school that literally took you high school through college?
Yeah. So yes, the boarding schools are very popular actually in that country, believe it or not. It is meant for a lot of rich people to send their kids away, but then they can party. Okay. But in my case, it was, yes, started boarding in grade 7th. And then after that, I studied architecture, in a town. Again, this town, a lot of people know. It was designed by French architect Le Corbusier. So I was very kind of like infatuated at that time with the different architecture in that town called Chandigarh. And you can imagine in India, generally the sanitation, it was not very clean. And here's this town properly planned with proper sanitation. So that's kind of how my little, from a tiny town, I told you, from where the dam was, right?
Right.
To a feisty bordering town between Pakistan and India to Chandigarh, which is like a planned town and the boarding, almost 9 years of boarding school.
That's just crazy to me just to think that. So like boarding schools out here, it's basically you go there. I mean, you can start in elementary school, but usually it ends, you end at high school. And here was the fact that you went from what we would call middle school all the way to through college. I think that's amazing.
Here, boarding schools are not very popular in this country. Parents don't send their kids to boarding school. I have not met a single person who's told me that.
We do have some, and a lot of them are like military schools,
Okay.
and then there's boarding schools for like behavioral issues and stuff like that. But they're not, they're not meant to be
normal boarding
permanent like yours. But there's
very common. It's very common, by the way, in that country. It's British. It's a kind of a British thing that it was inherited from British, because in British, if you look at it, they send their kids to boarding schools, right? If you watch any of the BBC.
Right. You have siblings?
Yes, I have a younger sister.
And are you close?
She's 6 years younger to me and she lives in Florida. So I think the boarding school and all that the age difference does
Right.
make an impact, but still, yeah, but maybe close, but not the way siblings, if you grow up together, it's different, right?
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask. Was that she end up following in your footsteps and going to boarding school as well?
No, no, no. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so you finished up with a degree in architecture?
Yeah, I studied architecture, and in fact, I came here to UC Berkeley. I studied environmental engineering and landscape urban planning, believe it or not. And here I am, holistic wellness champion.
That we've all gotten there. I'm an
Yeah.
endurance coach and I have a communications and an IT degree. So what was your first job working as an architecture?
So I worked for a year in India as an architect. Actually, at that time, the country was upcoming. And then I came here, and even here in Palo Alto, for Silicon Valley execs, I did quite a few custom homes, big custom homes, right? Because the money, right?
Oh, yeah.
Architecture follows money. That's just the way it is everywhere in the world. So rich people can only afford architects. And then I decided that the funny thing was nobody wanted to do any creative work. That's why I studied architecture. Everybody used to show me a house in Normandy or build me a house, something like that, in a city in Fremont or whatever, Woodside, Atherton, the rich cities here in Silicon Valley. I'm like, why won't you do something creative? No, 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 no. Send me something where it's so and so. Franz the third lived in a castle, and then build me a small castle here, right? That was architecture here in United States. So I went back and I studied again, and I switched into software. That's kind of the story.
Okay. Well, you and I got into that together, I guess, because I moved from communications into, well, I always had some sort of tech in the background growing
Yeah.
up. I was one of the, Generation X. So we started with, Apple IIe's and all that stuff. And I just kept
Okay.
going on the side. But later on, I ended up back in tech as well. So I get that. How long is that what you ended up before the recent most journey that you've got as far as wellness goes? Is that where you ended up basically doing software?
Yeah, so software was creative, right? I found it very creative. I was able to create those immersive experiences I worked for a whole bunch of companies here in Silicon Valley. I had my own company in interior design and furniture, online e-commerce. That was very immersive. I really loved doing product management is what I did, working with UX, UI, and then bringing all these experiences and then learning from the clients or the users how they're interacting. So that whole process was very interesting. And so I work with a bunch of companies here, all kind of companies you can think of, from Walmart to Western Union to startups, realtor, house, all those things, right? And then the COVID came and my contract ended with Western Union at that time. I was almost ready to start a new job, and the COVID came, and they said, "Oh, no, we're going to wait. We don't know what the heck it is. Everybody's saying work from home." The work from home culture didn't exist 2020. Prior to that, I said, "Oh, no, 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 we're going to wait." I started poking around into this whole holistic wellness and understanding what this is. And here I am in front of you.
That's amazing. Our lives kind of parallel a little bit.
Yeah.
I did the exact same thing. I had finished up a project in December of 2019, and I was just getting ready to start a new project. I got my new contract. I was getting ready to sign it. And the company that I was working for were like, no, we don't allow contractors to work from home. We only allow contractors to be in the office. And because of that, we're not going to go move forward with the contract until September of that year. And I ended up picking up my next contract at that point. So what was your first step when you were starting to look at things going on that made you, what was that first piece of curiosity that meant you start going into more of a health and wellness area of your life?
So prior to that, in the corporate life, everybody would ask me, I was always inclined towards taking care of myself using holistic therapies, right? So a lot of women, even men, they will come to me, "Hey, you know so much about all this. What should I do? I have diabetes. I have this." I'm like, "Oh my God." And I was a big proponent of a holistic lifestyle. So when this 2020 happened, I just wanted to look a little bit more deeper into holistic lifestyle and evidence and all that. So I started with just looking at the very high level. I had no clue at that time that I'm going to do focus on women wellness. I just wanted to more look at the chronic condition at that time and how can you prevent chronic condition using some of the lifestyle dietary modifications. In that journey, I found there were quite a few competitors. Even now, there are. So that journey kind of took me a couple of years. And then I started talking to holistic experts from all over the world. I talked to about 3,000 of them, or maybe 4,000 of them, understanding because I had no clue about this industry. Here I am, a software person trying to get into health and wellness with absolutely no knowledge, just kind of high level knowledge of, okay, I take care of myself, right? Everybody does that. In today's day and age, it's nothing new, to understanding the deeper part of it.
So let's step back, because I'm going to say that in my eyes, looking from the outside in, I'd say that wasn't the starting of your journey. And the question I'm going to ask you is, at what point were you always being that where you came from, which I believe that India itself has a big holistic culture, right? Am I wrong about that?
No.
Okay, so did it start? Is that how it started? Actually, is you growing up, you being in that culture, and that's how you started with the holistic, or did that end up starting somewhere else because of a certain situation or a symptom or something?
So India at that time, right, was trying to become a modern country. So Ayurveda. So people who did Ayurveda were kind of not respected as someone who was a medical doctor. So India is becoming modern. India is trying to shun their tradition. They're trying to look westward, and they're not looking into what they have, the plethora of gold, all these things. Oh, who wants to do Ayurveda? Who wants to do yoga? Who wants to do homeopathy or whatever? They were looking for medical doctors. So I don't think it happened. India was anti all this, right? And I'm talking, 90s, right? Somewhere around that time frame, right? So it has changed since then. Now the whole world knows about yoga. We know that, right? But so my thing actually started because I went to boarding school, as I mentioned, and in that boarding school, it was almost like a military school because it was run by, the management. They were ex-army, all of them. So we had a very, very regimented schedule every single day. You've got to exercise 3 hours. You have to eat well. You have to do this. You have to do that. I think it's the diet part started and the exercise part started at very young age in the boarding school, because that was a big discipline school that I went through. And it always stuck with me that I have to take care of myself, right? There was a lot of emphasis on we had an in-house dietitian. Nobody even knew what the dietitian was in that time in India. And we had an in-house nutritionist, a dietitian who would design the meals, and we would have balanced meals every single day. All those things was just like they were training athletes for Olympics. I mean, literally it was like that, right? So I think my awareness of that started at a very young age. And then I kept carrying on. I kept it with me, along with me, right? I never paid attention, became my lifestyle. But then the actual thing I think started when I was working for corporate and I started experiencing symptoms, perimenopause symptoms, which I was completely clueless. What the heck is perimenopause? I thought, I'm still young. I was 40. I'm not hitting menopause. I started getting all these symptoms and it just completely made a mess of me. I couldn't function. Literally, because you're having hot flashes and then at night you can't sleep. In the morning, you're groggy, brain fog, you can't think, and then you're not productive. So it's a vicious cycle that happens to women. And it happened to me at that time as well. So I think that's kind of the two things kind of, if you connect the dots, that's what started.
So when you came to America, you didn't get the temptation for hamburgers and hot dogs and French fries and shakes and stuff. You kept with your lifestyle.
No. I did the temptation. Of course, everybody goes through that. But the funny thing was that I would eat the hamburger and I would feel bloated. And I was like, oh my God, what the heck is inside this thing that I just could not eat any of the processed food from day one? That was the problem. As if something is wrong with my body that everybody enjoys the hamburgers. I could not, because I would get not sick, but I would be bloated like 3-4 days. And I'm like, oh my God, I can't even eat anything. So out of that, I had to resort to healthier food that is not processed. And I always got into the habit, even here, even though I was going to school, but trying to eat healthier, fresh as much as I could. So I resorted a lot to lentils, beans and lentils, and I'll soak them up overnight. And in the morning, I'll, boil it and then put some onions and tomatoes and like a curry, right?
Yeah.
So I resorted a lot to those curried lentils because sometimes fresh vegetables or whatever. So that's how I survived here because I could not eat outside, the processed food outside.
And it's interesting that, okay, so you went back to the way that you're used to eating, yet you still ended up with the symptoms of premenopause, yet you were already eating fresh, you were eating non-processed, you were eating all the stuff we say that will help you.
Yeah.
Yet you were doing all that, but you're still ending up with the symptoms. What did you do? What did you finally find out about the premen and the symptoms that you could, at least help?
Yeah, so I think at that time I was very, very stressed out. I think stress can exacerbate the symptoms. And also I had put on weight at that time. I was not as healthy from a weight point of view because I'm trying to, you can imagine the Silicon Valley lifestyle. It's very fast paced. You have go, go, go. You have barely any time for exercise. So I did not exercise as much as I would have liked at that time, is what I'm saying during the perimenopause phase of my life. And so if you put on weight, you're not exercising and you're eating on the go and you're stressed out, all these things can add, right? And then probably some inflammation inside my body of something which I did not understand can add to the symptoms, right? During this whole phase, when you get busy, you're not taking care of yourself as much as I was able to when I was much younger, is what I'm saying.
Right. That
Right?
that makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
So, what did you change personally as
Mhm.
this was going on? I mean, obviously you were doing your homework, but you were still working, but this wasn't
Yeah.
2020 yet. So this
Yeah.
was prior to that, correct?
That's
What did
right.
you end up finding that helped?
So I had to change again. I had kind of deviated from my original, whatever I was used to, in high school, as I told you. So I had to become more stricter on the dietary aspects of understanding what I should do, what I should eat. And I was not incorporating more fresh fruits and vegetables as much as morely focusing on the lentil. Started doing that and I started exercising more to keep up because I needed to lose weight, right? The weight was also causing all these symptoms. There's a clear data talks about the overweight and the symptoms of for perimenopause, menopause. For example, Latino Americans and African American women have more kind of their symptoms are more aggravated, the hot flashes. And it goes back to their obesity levels and also goes back to the lifestyle. So I'm not saying I was at that level, but still, I was not obese, but I was still overweight from my BMI and I was stressed out and all those things. My lifestyle had kind of come into a little bit of a sad lifestyle because you live here for so long and you just get used to the rut and you don't have time. It's not that you don't want to do it, you just don't have time to do it.
Yeah, and that's absolutely what goes on here in America, which is what one of the with that first question I asked you about being tempted was because we have something here, we call it the SAD, right? The standard American diet, which is sad. It literally is sad. It's
Yeah.
it's fast food, it's convenience. And now in today's world, we've got meal plans and we've got home meals that can be delivered that are actually healthy for you, that are fresh, delivered flash frozen, and you just heat them up. We didn't hear of meal planning back then, where we've got people here that are looking at their meals on a weekly basis. Saturday, Sunday is for meal planning and they put everything together and then now it's much better. But back then that wasn't the trend.
No, no, nobody paid attention to eating healthy here. Nobody was probably informed or aware of the healthy eating, or they didn't care. I don't know what it was, but the culture was not eating healthy.
Yeah, it was, eat what you want. It was the seafood diet.
Yeah, and seafood,
Food.
exactly.
So, well, and you are, case study for the perfect way of thinking about it. I need to ask you, because I'm very curious about this, how you talked about, Latino versus Indian versus white versus
Yeah.
Black women having different, I don't know, is it a different symptoms or different level of symptoms, than, not, I want to say white people, but I'm basically saying that, each of them have a different level of these symptoms, and you've seen data on that. What did you find as far as that goes? Just a little bit on the difference between the different races.
There's a lot of difference. The age of the menopause is different. For example, Caucasian women, 51, 52, Latino, African American women, 47, 48, Indian women in India, 45, 46, some Muslim women in Sudan, 40, 43, 44, 45, something like that. Big difference based on your ethnicity, based on your lifestyle, and sometimes based on your religion in this case, right? And so are the symptoms. Japanese women don't get hot flashes. African American, Latino women are very high on hot flashes because of a dietary lifestyle, right? And then Indian women, mainly muscle pains. And then so are Asian women because of their skeleton, like a slimmer musculoskeletal issues. So it depends a lot on the age of the menopause. Is different for different ethnicity. This is average data I'm talking about. Of course, someone can go here and there deviation. Also, the symptoms are different for different ethnic groups. So this kind of level of detail, I don't think we understand as a society at all. Forget about all over the world. We don't understand it enough because there's not enough research on all this, what I'm taking. This is just high level.
Yeah, no. And I get that. But it's interesting, though, is that you mentioned the people that had hot flashes versus musculoskeletal is because I know that, well, at least what I understand is African American, Latino, heavy on the starches, right?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
really heavy, between rice and potatoes and breading and everything else versus Indian. And you please correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm only going on what I've seen. Indian and Japanese, Chinese, it's one starch. Basically it's rice, and that's your one starch versus a lot more vegetables, even limited on meat. But yet, so you get this muscular, right? So that tells me as far as the level of carbohydrates, it's like overcarb gives you those hot flashes, undercarb gives you muscle pain. That's me looking at that high level, 45,000 feet up in the air.
Yeah.
Obviously, there's a lot more nuance to it, but it's interesting the way that you mentioned it like that. All I think about is the fried plantains and corn and the paella and all that from the Latinas and that chicken and a lot of things in the African American community that I've been around. A lot of things are fried. Love their fried stuff. And then moving more into India and Japanese, where there's a lot of vegetables, tons of vegetables. India uses more lentils and beans. Japan does not. They're more soy and dame and things like that. So it's an interesting study. I would be super interested to find out how that goes.
No, it is fascinating.
So let's move forward to now 2020. You're in the aspect of COVID. You're talking to these experts. How did you end up looking and deciding that, hey, you know what, I can really do some good with this and starting your business?
Yeah. So like I said, I spent a couple of years it was sort of like a podcast, not a podcast, but it was like an FB live that I ran, kind of did experts from all over the world during my journey of talking to them. There was a lot of women. Most of them I interviewed were women, and almost 90% of them were mid-aged women. It just so happened. Even the men were mid-aged because I think, look at us, right? We change up careers, you've tried something. Now you want to do something you really love. And now you're trying to find meaning of life. And there it is, holistic or whatever. Most of them would talk about their journey into menopause, perimenopause, and how cool as they were. This is crazy. Nobody knows about all that stuff I kept hearing. And I'm trying to figure out what should I do within the holistic umbrella. And if it makes sense for me to do it, or should I go back to my consulting, right? That's kind of where I was. And I'm just curious. And then I realized that, hey, here it is. I went through hell in my journey. Here are all these women talking about it. Let me just go deeper into it and try to understand if there's something out there. that's kind of how it happened. It wasn't like one day switch. Okay, I'm going to do this. It took a lot of talking to a lot of people and interviewing them and or learning about this holistic, therapies on a higher level. And if there's any evidence or no evidence, acupuncture, acupressure, Ayurveda, yoga, the whole laundry list of so much, right? But we don't understand it enough. How do you not take it?
Like I said, I'm an endurance coach. I coach people to marathons and, these crazy races. I've got 15 or 16 people on my roster that I personally coach. And then I coach for run clubs and different other people. But my personal clients that I coach one-on-one into these crazy races, I end up with those same exact things. And the mean of the age group is in the 50s, right? Most of the people that I coach are over the age of 40 and the mean age is like 55. So these are these people that are ultra shape in great in fantastic shape, or they want to get to that way. And they're doing these 100-mile runs and marathons and Ironmans and triathlons all over the world. And, so it comes in with different. And I've actually, I've had some women that have actually gone through menopause as their endurance, as they're an endurance athlete. So minimal fat, right? Like their bodies have, minimal fat percentage, and their cardiovascular system is off the charts. And they still, have these symptoms that you've talked about. And a lot of them actually end up with them in a much, much more persistent and higher pain threshold, just for the fact that, and mostly is the muscle side, right? And I've seen that, right? So I literally have found, that we've changed diet and I've changed their program in accordance with what's going on in their lives as far as peri and post menopause. And it's a very interesting subject. So I've seen it. What made you, or what was the turning point to you to decide to start doing, creating these programs and actually getting people on board it?
So I tried a lot on myself, right? When I was going through all these, and by trial and error, I tried to fix myself, which I did, which I was able to fix myself somehow. I have no idea what I did. The more I actually started understanding the perimenopause, menopause, and it's just not a slew of symptoms that women go through, which I went through, as I mentioned to you, 4 or 5 of them myself. And the other issue is, for a lot of these women, it goes on for years. It's not like a 1 year kind of a deal. Okay, fine, turn off the switch, and I am technically a postmenopausal woman. That's not how it happens, as you know. It's a transition, and transition can go up to 10 years. And then even if the switch is turned off, in this case, it's not just one thing. That's the problem.
That's interesting. I didn't know it was 10 years.
Absolutely. It starts in as early as in 40s, or sometimes earlier than that. And like, as I mentioned earlier, 51, 52 is the average age. And the years leading up to when the menopause happens for most of the women are horrendous, completely horrendous, because now your hormones are fluctuating like crazy and your hormones are dipping down and then sometimes they're going up. And that's why, we joke around it, right? The women are having mood swings, but it's not their fault. It's the hormones that are going crazy, like crazy seesaw. And that's impacting your mood, your brain, your gut microbiome, your hair, your skin, your emotional balance. You can't sleep at night. Not just one thing, it's everything that happens.
I did not realize that. Listen,
Serious.
look at me. Look at me right here. Right, men, all you men out there, we are very lucky. Okay. If you're listening to this, not only do women from the age of 13, 12, 10, 11, 12, 13, up to 40s, are they doing this harsh monthly trial that they've got to go through? But then after that, they have to go through 10 years, up to 10 years of this horror. So guys, count your freaking blessings. Take care of your women and understand that this is what's going on. That's the end of my PSA. Thank you for listening. Okay. Yeah. So I believe that now. I'm like, wow. Okay. I am a lucky person. What did you find as far as probably the most common denominator did you find with people that are using your programs? It's the menstrual pre posts and menstrual menopausal.
So most common symptoms, majority of the women have hot flashes, sleep issues, and brain fog. These are the three. And they're all intertwined, right? And that's what I had. Because you can't sleep at night in the morning. So these are the most common. But interestingly, during my research, right, I also found that loss of libido is also one of the symptoms in women. We also know hair loss. A lot of women start losing hair as you see older women, the hair thinning starts. But the loss of libido is more complicated, and I'll tell you why. It can impact relationships, right? If it's not communicated openly with your partner or spouse or what, right? And then interestingly, the data also talks about 60% of the divorces that are happening in UK and US are happening towards the menopausal years, and there's a rise of gray divorce. We have that data. That's it.
That makes sense. And you know what? That was my thought. I was like, I was wondering, what is the divorce rate for
Yeah.
pre, post, and menopausal women? And you just answered that. I literally that was my next question. So, and it makes sense, right? Because that loss of libido. For everybody listening out there, as far as that loss of libido, and I'm sure, like you said, that could be a huge cause of some of these divorces. Is there one thing, or is there a couple of different things that people could try holistically that might help with that?
Yeah, so pelvic health exercises, basically our body is all one. We want the blood to flow all over, right, on all our organs. And sometimes the blood flow is not as much as it's supposed to be, right, in that part of the body. You can try to enforce your pelvic health. And also, it also has a lot to do. It's not just the pelvic health exercises alone that would work, but also if your gut health is screwed up, everything gets screwed up. Gut.
Interesting.
Yep.
So in the YouTube video, I'm going to go ahead and link to Craig Brocky's episode where he talks about gut health. That episode was all about gut health. I didn't realize it got down to that point where actually gut health even went into pre, post, and menopausal women. Wow.
It's huge. And then your emotional well-being, right? Women are very sensitive creatures. They connect emotionally. So if there has been some kind of a trauma during your marriage years or during your relationships, and you haven't been able to digest that, and you haven't been able to take it out, that can also impact your libido. We know that there is data behind all these things I'm talking about. So it's a multitude of different factors. The kids also add tension. That is the truth, as much as we all love our kids. But you need to have open communication with your partner to be able to have this healthy relationships. So there are multitude of things that are happening. Hormone fluctuations, absolutely yes. Emotional, not able to have emotional stability, emotional imbalance, that can lead to it, right? Stress is obviously gut health.
Yes.
They can be all contributing factors. It's not just, I do my Kegels or I do my pelvic health strengthening. I start doing strength training. It's going to fix it. It's kind of complicated, so to speak.
All right. Well, I'm going to give you your last question. In relationships with pre, post, and menopausal women, can you give us one thing or one good thing that we can do to help support our partners while they're going through this?
Yeah, absolutely. Just listen to them. And I think the best thing men can do is at least be aware. A lot of men are not even aware of menopause post, right? I was not aware. Forget the men. Wait, if as a woman, I had no clue what the heck this means. How can men understand this? So I think doing these podcasts, I'm so thankful and so, amazed at that, how you're bringing this topic out in the forefront. So I think men need to understand this topic a little bit, not doing a PhD, but enough understanding to support their partners, support their wives, girlfriends, or whoever when they're going through this journey. That's what men should have a basic understanding.
I agree, because I've learned a lot right now, and I'm going to apply some of that myself. Interesting. So I just want to talk about, Amita Sharma, and she has a whole bunch of programs, and they're great programs, called NourishDoc.com, NOURISH.com. That will be put into the show notes. If you go onto the website, at the bottom in their footer are all of their socials. And I'm going to go ahead and I'll link those also in the show notes. Amita, I really appreciate everything that you do. And I think these programs are amazing. And I wish you all the success in the world, because I think this is something that definitely needs to be looked at. And you could save some marriages, save some women. And I really appreciate everything that you do. So I'll go ahead and put all that stuff in the show notes. For the rest of you, if you're watching on YouTube, please go ahead and hit that like, subscribe, and the notification bell so you'll always know when we're dropping a new episode. If you're listening on Apple or Spotify or any of the other podcast directories, please go ahead and leave a message on Spotify. That they got the new comment section, right? But they also have reviews. And if you can leave us a review, and you know what? I don't care if it's good. If it's bad, that just means that there's feedback in there, and just let us know why you thought it might not have been, as superior as you would like it to be, and I will make some changes. So let us know. Other than that, again, for my guest Amita and myself, Brad Minus, thank you so much for listening. We will see you in the next one. Well, that wraps up another episode of Life-Changing Challengers. I'm your host, Brad Minus, saying thank you for joining us on this journey of transformation. If today's stories inspired you, please take a moment to review, share, and follow us on your favorite podcast platform. Your support helps us reach more listeners and create an even bigger impact. Remember, every challenge is a chance to grow. Until next time, keep pushing, keep challenging, and never stop pursuing your extraordinary.